Hello, and welcome to Making It with Scott. Today we are looking at the scroll saw and making our first initial cuts. This is a very basic tutorial video aimed at people that are just starting out. I did release this video yesterday, but there was a bunch of camera issues that I was not aware of until after I uploaded it, and I think we can do better. So we're going to do a second take at this, and let's get started. All right, before we jump into the video, let's talk about safety a little bit. Scroll saws are very safe. They tend to make band-aid injuries if you accidentally run your finger into them, but they do create a lot of fine sawdust. So wearing safety glasses and maybe a dust mask while you're working is a good idea. When I'm in the shop, even though the scroll saw isn't super loud, I do wear hearing protection. I have a bunch of different types. These are my favorite. So these are not only earplugs, they're also a Bluetooth headset. So I can listen to music or a podcast in the background while I'm working, answer a phone call. There's a lot of different ones out there. I got these on Amazon. I will leave a link in the description. So that's it. Let's jump in. All right, now when you're using the scroll saw, if you want to be cutting straight up and down at a 90-degree angles, you want to check to make sure your saw is square. So I have a small machinist square here. I am just going to set it next to the blade, and I'm looking through. I don't see any daylight on either side, so I know we're running true. Now to adjust this, it's different on every type of saw. I would loosen up and I would tilt the arms either left or right, and then lock it down once it's square. Some machines you tilt the table, other machines you tilt the arms. All right. So these little squares are really nice. If you don't have one, if you have a ruler like this, you could take this off and use this for a square. There's other options out there, but a small machinist square, they're not expensive and they'll last forever. I will leave a link to one from Amazon in the description. I think they're right around $10, so it's definitely worth having one just so you can make sure that your saw is square. Now when you're cutting throughout the day, if you want to see and guarantee you're running square, you could take a piece of scrap, and I'm going to cut in like a jigsaw puzzle key. It doesn't have to be pretty. All right, so once we've done that, if you can slide this piece through and bring it in from the top, if it's not binding at all, you know you're running square. Let's say it was at a slight angle or a very big angle. Now, since we cut it at that angle, you can see it's triangular shaped, right? So you can't push it through, so you know you're not square. All right? Now there's times when you purposely want to set your table at an angle. Let's say you're making like a collapsible basket or something where you'd want that. So you can just push it all together, and then you have a three-dimensional thing. But if you're just cutting out a flat pattern, you want to avoid that. Another way of checking would be to make a line, just cut in a little bit, flip your scrap piece of wood over, cut again, look and see if your lines are parallel, which these are. Or you can make a line, come back, shut your saw off, come in from the back, and if you can push it in and it's not binding, you know you're also square. So you can do these quick checks throughout the day. You know, a big thing you can do is just make your cut and then look at it, and if it looks fine, keep going. If not, make adjustments. All right, before we put the blade on, we have to make sure that we're putting it on in the right direction. So this is a number 12 blade. You can see these teeth look like this, right? So what they're doing is they're going to be cutting on the downstroke, all right? So if you put the blade on upside down, it's going to want to cut on the upstroke. So rather than pushing it down onto the table of the scroll saw, it's going to want to bring it up in the air. So if you have your blade on upside down, it's going to start chattering. You're going to try to hold it down, and it's just going to be like, what's going on with my saw? More than likely, your blade is on upside down. To figure out, with this one's easy because you can actually see it because it's so big. If you're not sure if it's a smaller blade, turn it sideways, gently pinch it. Now, if you can move your finger down and it's not binding, that would be the upstroke. Now, if I try going the other direction, it's just, I can't. It's binding up. So we know that it's cutting in this direction here. So binding is down. So we're going to put it in this way. One here is a reverse tooth blade. So the majority of the teeth are facing down, but on the very bottom of the blade, they are facing up. So it would be that way. Now that wood there, let me move over here. That blade is going to be cutting on the downstroke for the majority of the wood, all right? And then just this little section on the bottom here is going to be cut on the upstroke. So what that does is it gives you a nicer finish on the bottom of the wood so you don't get tear out. These blades here are actually made by Niqua, and Niqua puts a crimp on the top of their blade. So I don't know if we're going to be able to show that crimp. If we turn it right, yeah, you can see that crimp there, right there. So having that crimp, you can physically see it or feel it, so you don't have to sit there and try to figure out which side's up or which side's down. You can just use that crimp, and then you know you're up. So without even looking at the blade, at the teeth, I can see that crimp, so I know which way's up. So yeah, so Niqua, Flying Dutchman have that crimp. Other blades don't. I mean, there's exceptions to the rule too. There's crown tooth blades that basically look like an M or a crown. Those cut in both the up and down stroke. You think that would be the optimal design, but yeah, it's not. Not my favorite. Your saw might be a little bit different. So the chucks on these, you just have a screw. You got a knob that you tighten. All right, and all it does is pinch the blade in the slot here. So put the blade in. Now I'm putting it to the top of the blade holder. Give it a slight tightening. Now this one has a cam, so I'm going to lower that cam, reach underneath the bottom. Same thing, I'm slipping in that slot and tightening. Now I'm going to bring this cam up to tension the blade. And now we have tension on the blade. If we need to adjust it, there's a knob in the back. Your saw might be a little bit different, but you're going to put the saw in, you're going to clamp it in, and then do adjustments to get tension. So feeding the wood into the saw, you want to put slight pressure down on the wood. If you don't press down against the table, it's going to start chattering, because those teeth are grabbing on the downstroke and the upstroke, and it's just going to vibrate. So push down, slight pressure down. Now we're going to let the saw do the work. Taking our time. I'm cutting, this is 1-inch pine. I just had it laying around. So to do practice cuts, whatever scrap you have laying around, if you find a pallet laying on the side of the road, that'll give you some good practice wood. So there we go. Slight pressure pushing down. Let's talk about cutting straight lines on the scroll saw, okay? So for this example, I know the camera's skewed over. I am going to run this straight through like I was cutting on a table saw, through straight. So I'm doing my best. I'm not looking at what I'm cutting. I'm just looking at the wood where I'm pushing, okay? So by pushing it straight through, it veered off and it trailed off to the edge here, all right? And that's because scroll saw blades, when they're made, they are stamped out. And when they're stamped out, you know, they are cleaned up a little bit, but one side of the blade will have a slight burr to it, so it will never track straight. Like everything else, there's exceptions to this rule, all right? If you're looking at, Olson makes a precision ground blade that will cut straight, but they're way more expensive. And PS Woods. They make super sharps. So what they do is they set the teeth like you would on a bandsaw blade. So they bend the teeth like that. So one tooth is bent to the left, the next one's bent to the right. So that will cut straight, but that's going to give you a much bigger curve. So like if you were making like a puzzle for like a little kid, these would be horrible because it would take too much material away. All right. So with just a normal blade, we're going to draw another line here. And what we're going to do is we're going to run the wood at an angle. All right. So this would be straight through. I'm going to turn it at a slight angle. So I'm going to start straight. I'm going to start my cut, and then I'm going to angle it. And I'm going to look at what's going on, and I'm going to do micro adjustments as I cut. So it's coming straight. So now I'm pivoting quite a bit. Now I'm going to stop before I get to the end. So just so you can see, that would be straight. So you can see that big triangle in there. So that's as much of an angle as I'm sending it through. The hardest thing to cut on a scroll saw is a straight line. If you can avoid cutting large straight lines, that would be great. Scroll saws are much more about making very precise curved lines. If you want to be cutting straight up and down at a 90-degree angles, you want to check to make sure your saw is square. So I have a small machinist square here. I am just going to set it next to the blade, and I'm looking through. I don't see any daylight on either side, so I know we're running true. Now to adjust this, it's different on every type of saw. I would loosen up and I would tilt the arms either left or right and then lock it down once it's square. Some machines you tilt the table, other machines you tilt the arms. All right. So these little squares are really nice. If you don't have one, if you have a ruler like this, you could take this off and use this for a square. There's other options out there, but a small machinist square, they're not expensive and they'll last forever. I will leave a link to one from Amazon in the description. I think they're right around $10. So it's definitely worth having one just so you can make sure that your saw is square. Now, when you're cutting throughout the day, if you want to see and guarantee you're running square, you could take a piece of scrap, and I'm going to cut in like a jigsaw puzzle key. It doesn't have to be pretty. All right, so once we've done that, if you can slide this piece through and bring it in from the top, if it's not binding at all, you know you're running square. Let's say it was at a slight angle or a very big angle. Now, since we cut it at that angle, you can see it's triangular shaped, right? So you can't push it through, so you know you're not square. All right? Now, there's times when you purposely want to set your table at an angle. Let's say you're making like a collapsible basket or something where you'd want that. So you can just push it all together, and then you have a three-dimensional thing. But if you're just cutting out a flat pattern, you want to avoid that. Another way of checking would be to make a line, just cut in a little bit, flip your scrap piece of wood over, cut again, look and see if your lines are parallel, which these are. Or you can make a line, come back, shut your saw off, come in from the back, and if you can push it in and it's not binding, you know you're also square. So you can do these quick checks throughout the day. You know, a big thing you can do is just make your cut and then look at it, and if it looks fine, keep going. If not, make adjustments. I have it affixed to the wood here. So what I do is I put down blue painter's tape, and then I glue the pattern to the top of the tape. That way when we're done, we can just pull the tape off. We made a sticker, and then we don't have any glue residue. As far as glue goes, If you watch the first video, I kind of go over this. There's a lot of different ways of fixing patterns. I really like Super 77 spray adhesive, Super 77, where you spray it on your pattern, let it tack up for a couple seconds, and then put it down. For the patterns we're working with today, I am using this glue stick. I've used a lot of glue sticks, and I have not been happy with any of them until I found this one. It's a different type of glue. Normally they're PVA. This one's PVP. So I bought this for my 3D printers, and it works so well on paper that that's what we're using today. So yeah, both of these. This one here, Super 77, you can get at Walmart, you know, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, you know, any home improvement store. It's a pretty easy to find adhesive. I've used a lot of different ones in the past as well. I always come back to Super 77. And then this specific one is from Amazon. I will leave a link in the description for both of those. So we put the glue stick on and we glued it down. So I actually wanted to demonstrate that, but I had an interruption after I glued it. So, that's the reason for that. All right, so I'll zoom in a little bit here. We'll get close to the saw here, and we'll start cutting. Take your time, let the saw do the work. So I'm coming up to my first corner here. I'm going to stop, I'm going to back out a little bit and come in from the other side. That will give me an area to move my blade, and then continue. So this one, I want to keep this corner really, really sharp. So I'm going to do a pigtail. I'm going to cut past, loop it around, and then come back in. So there's my loop. So by doing that, you have a very sharp pointed corner. Now I'm just going to turn. I'm not pushing ahead. I'm turning, putting pressure on the back of the blade, all right? And then when I get to the line, then I'll start pushing forward to cut. That will not give you the sharpest corner, but it will do a acceptable job. Now if you just want to go around the bends, just stop and then turn while cutting. It's going to be rounded over a little bit. Still acceptable. So come down here, we're going to stop pushing forward, and we're going to slowly pivot, putting pressure on the back of the blade. So we're not cutting, we're just turning. So we're sawing out a little area for the blade to go. You can do a pigtail. Now this corner here is very tight, so I'm not going to try turning it. I'm going to back out, come in from another angle, come in from the other side till it mates up. Now I have plenty of room to turn my blade. So we could also skip this one entirely. And then come back when we're done cutting. Back of the blade, turn, 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 now push. Come around. Come down. Come in from the other side. Back of the blade. Back of the blade. So we cut that out so we can remove this. Now we can come back and then cut that little place we missed by just making a V. Coming down, backing all the way out, coming in from the other side. And there you go. So now we have that all cut out. So this one I'm going to cut in real speed, just so you can see what that looks like. I'm not forcing the blade, but I've been doing this for a lot of years, so. And there we go. So the nice thing about using the blue painter's tape, when you're done, you can just peel the tape off. And then you won't have any residual glue. So, so if you're making lettering, like cursive scripts kind of thing, that's what this will look like. All right, next up, same thing, I already put this glue stick, stars. So the stars will do the pigtails around the loops, and then you can practice on stopping and moving without cutting. See if I can move this just a little bit further down. There you go. All right. Yep, so we're going to get to that line. We're going to stop like a fraction of a millimeter before, go against the back, and do that turn. We're going to do that loop, come in. Now if it binds up, what can happen is that little piece that you cut out will get wedged in here. So sometimes you got to back out a little bit and let it drop. So there we go. Now, if our blade is nice and square and we didn't force it, we're able to bring that through. All right. So that's good for working on those loops, those pigtails. So next up, we have these ducks. So we have one duck where we're going to cut out the exterior, and then we're going to have a physical duck. And then here I drilled a hole in the center, and we're going to cut a duck-shaped hole into the wood. All right. The nice thing about the ducks are so when I'm making this turn here, I'm kind of putting pressure with one finger here, and I am pivoting. So I'm pivoting the wood around my finger here. So pressure here and pivot, so I'm turning. We're not in a rush. Consistency comes with practice. Now, if you start going off the line like that, take your time coming back. So in this instance, we could have came back and cleaned up that line, but we're going to leave it to prove a point. So you're getting down on yourself where, oh, that looks horrible. Well, once you take the pattern off, you're not going to be able to notice it. Well, nobody else is going to notice it. You'll notice it because you did it. But anybody else is going to look at this, they're not going to see, oh, well, that's too big there. They're going to say, oh, wow, it's a duck. And what little kid wouldn't want a duck? So with these cuttings, I would suggest just throwing a date on the bottom of them, and then periodically just cut out another one, and then compare how much better you're getting. All right. So we have an internal cut here. Cool thing about the scroll saw is you can drill a hole, fish the blade through, and make internal cuts. Pretty neat. All right, so we'll do that. It's not a race. Bring that out. So there we go. We have a duck-shaped hole, which is pretty neat. So next up we have this dachshund. Now if you notice how thin the tail is, this is going to be the weakest point. If you give this to a 3-year-old, he'd break the tail off in the matter of minutes, all right? So when you're cutting it out, you have to realize that this part is going to be fragile, so you're going to be careful with that part, all right? The rest of it is pretty much straightforward. So I want to keep that point, so I'm going to back out, come in from the other side. So I just made myself some room to move my blade over. Now when you're making anything with a face, you want to make sure you get as close to the lines as you can. Our eyes are naturally attracted to the faces of things, the heads of things. So if you get off the line around the face, it might be noticeable. Okay, I'm going to pick that up. Now, when I'm cutting, I'm not going to be pushing against that tail. Then we'll remove the pattern so we can look at it. There you go. And you know, you can hand it to people and tell them to, hey, look at my my dachshund. All right, and the last one we're going to be cutting is this wolf. Now, we're going to start with the internal cuts and then cut the outside. So a good rule of thumb is you want to start in the middle and work your way out. All right, so if you would cut this whole outside out, then this will be fragile here, that might be fragile there. So start with the middle. So you see I drilled my holes really, really close to the lines here. And that just makes it much easier to cut out. I have a drill press next to my scroll saw that I can reach. Which just makes things a lot easier. So I don't have to get up. I'm sitting down. I'm comfortable. A little raking side to side to clean that up. So now those interior cuts are cut out. So this tail here is really, really tight. So rather than just trying to go around the horn and come through, I am going to cut to that line, back up, and then cut in again. So I'm just backing all the way out. We'll come in from the tip of the tail here. Want to keep that ear, so I'm going to do a pigtail. Come around. Taking our time on the face. And there we go. So there you go, a little bit of sanding, and we now have a bunch of little friends. All right, you made it to the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. A thumbs up, and if you'd like to subscribe, that would help me out tremendously. Other than that, we do have a couple shows coming up. In 2 weeks, I'll be in Mississippi, and a couple weeks after that, I'll be in North Carolina. So the video schedule will be pretty nil. But after that, I have quite a few months where I'll be able to get back onto a regular schedule and get going on that. So thank you guys so much. If you're new to scroll sawing, enjoy it. It's a journey. Once you get the hang of it, it's just amazing. So have a great day. We'll catch you next time.